All right, so we are going to do an iReady lesson together. I'm a big fan of iReady because iReady is set up in the way the questions are formatted. It's set up very similar to the LEAP test, which all fifth grade students are going to have to take in the spring. And the format of the questions is, I find, the same on the ELA test and on the social studies test. And so getting used to this style of questions where you will give an answer, and then the second question will say, well, what's the evidence for that first answer? And you have to be able to figure out what the best evidence is. This also will help you in your writing, because anytime you make a claim in your writing, you have to have evidence to back it up. So I find this helps us as readers and as writers. So I go to lesson 1, and it is on finding main ideas and details. And they give us a learning target. It says, figuring out the main ideas of a text and the key details supporting them is necessary for understanding that text. A topic is what a passage is about. A main idea is an important idea about that topic. Short passages usually develop just one main idea. Long passages often have 2 or more main ideas. A passage's details are the facts, examples, and other information stated in the text. The details that help explain a main idea are called key details. We sometimes say that the key details support main ideas. Okay, so one thing you have to be aware of is that everything that's not the main idea in a passage, all of those things are details. But what you want to be able to do is understand the difference between key details and just regular details. Key details are things which will support, they lift up, they hold up the main idea. And other details that are not key details, those are just extra fillers that are in a text, but they're not the more important details. The key details, remember, always point back to the main idea. All right, so we got a little passage here we're going to read. At some point in your life, you've probably looked up, gazed at the moon, and studied it in wonder. Throughout time, the moon has inspired many people. In 1801, Ludwig van Beethoven composed a piano piece called Moonlight Sonata. Later, in 1889, Vincent van Gogh painted The Starry Night. In this painting, swirls of white and yellow create a halo around the moon. In 2011, Marilyn Singer wrote a book called A Full Moon is Rising, about how people all over the world celebrate the moon. The next time you gaze upon the moon, maybe you'll be inspired by it too. Okay, so we're going to go to our next page. And they have this little chart here. It says, consider what you have read about the main ideas and key details. In the main idea organizer below, write down one sentence from the passage you think states the main idea. Then write down 2 key details that develop the main idea. And they give you 1 key detail. Okay. One thing that you need to just get used to being in a 5th grade English class, and I will say this throughout the year, is that when you've read something, you're often going to have to go back to the text and maybe either read it again or at least look over it again. You're not supposed to read a text, then have some questions to answer, and you just sit with those questions in front of you. You go back to the text. I'm having to do this with a computer screen because you're virtual or you're watching this at home. But if you were in class with me, you would see that in front of me, I would have the text. I actually have it not on the computer, but I have a workbook with the same thing. And I will be looking at the passage and I'll be looking at the questions, and I go back and forth, back and forth. Oftentimes I'll have the passage on the active board screen and the questions in front of me, and I'll physically walk back and forth so that students understand the importance of going back to the text. Do not try to answer this without looking back. They don't expect you to be able to just read a little passage or even a longer passage and recall everything. Oftentimes you're reading it through just the first time, just kind of getting the gist of what it's about. But then if you have to answer some questions, the idea is to go back to the text. These questions are not designed, let's leave the questions alone. These texts are not designed for you to absorb all the information with necessarily one read through. Oftentimes you are going to have to go back. All the time, you're probably going to have to go back in 5th grade because these texts are what we call complex texts. And I'll say this throughout lessons. I might have already said this in another lesson that you've watched because I'm doing these out of order. But just remember that going back to the text is a key. So I'm going to do that right now. And because it's a short passage and it's not really going to knock time off of anything, I'm going to read it again. So I go back. At some point in your life, you've probably looked up, gazed at the moon, and studied it in wonder. Throughout time, the moon has inspired many people. In 1801, Ludwig van Beethoven composed a piano piece called Moonlight Sonata. And right there, I remember that I saw that as a detail. They went ahead and gave me a key detail that Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata was composed. Okay, so that's something. All right, so I know that's not my main idea, but it's supporting the main idea. Later in 1889, Vincent van Gogh painted The Starry Night. In this painting, swirls of white and yellow create a halo around the moon. In 2011, Marilyn Singer wrote a book called A Full Moon is Rising about how people all over the world celebrate the moon. The next time you gaze upon the moon, maybe you'll be inspired by it too. Okay, so what they want me to do again is they want me to find a sentence from that passage that is the main idea and put it below. They let me know that Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata was composed, that's going to be one of the key details. Okay, so I'm going back to my passage. I'm looking at it. Now, let me try to do this in reverse. Sometimes if you don't know the answer to a question, if you can figure out the other parts, then you'll be able to figure out your main answer. So we're looking for the main idea, but they gave us a key detail. So if I know that this is a key detail, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, I know there are two other details, detail 2 and detail 3, key details. Let's see if we can figure out the second key detail. We know the first one is about Beethoven. Later in 1889, Vincent van Gogh painted The Starry Night. That's going to be my second key detail. So I'm going to put that down here. And you have your little area over here where you can do certain things. I got my text box. And I'm going to try 16. And I click right here. And I'm going to go ahead and expand that a little bit. And so we were going to say Vincent van Gogh, and I might have spelled that wrong. We'll see. Painted The Starry Night. And let me go back up and see. Maybe I want to add some more to that. Painted The Starry Night. Okay, and then this next sentence says, in this painting, swirls of white and yellow create a halo around the moon. All right, this sentence right here. In this painting, swirls of white and yellow create a halo around the moon. This detail backs up the sentence ahead of it. So I know that this is a detail, but it's not a key detail. How do I know it's not a key detail? Because that sentence is backing up the sentence about Van Gogh. We say Van Gogh painted this painting called The Starry Night. And then the next sentence explains what's in the painting. So it's a detail backing up another detail, which means it's a minor detail. Remember our terms that we had. Topic is what something's about. The main idea is an idea that we see in a passage. Then we have a key detail, and it supports the main idea. Well, those other details, I call those minor details. They're not really important. Oftentimes, they back up other details, so they're not key. So the sentence after the Van Gogh painting that explains what was actually in the painting, that's a minor detail, so it's not going to be one of my key details. Then it says, in 2011, Marilyn Singer wrote a book called A Full Moon is Rising about how people all over the world celebrate the moon. So that's going to be my third key detail. Let's go back here. I'm just going to add a little bit more. A painting inspired by the moon. Okay, so what's another key detail? Is that in 2011. In 2011, I'm just going to put M. Singer wrote a book. I can't remember the title. A Full Moon is Rising. A Full Moon is Rising. About the ways people are inspired by the moon. By the way, do you see what I did here? I didn't quote it directly, but I paraphrased it. If I quoted it directly, if I took the sentence itself and I was using this in a writing, I would need to put the whole thing in quotations. But I'm just paraphrasing what the sentence was about. I'm putting it in my own words. Okay. And we want the main idea. So we see Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata was composed. Vincent van Gogh painted The Starry Night. And Marilyn Singer wrote this book about how people are inspired by the moon. So knowing those are my key details. And while I'm doing that real quick, this is just me being me. I realize I did his name wrong. Okay. We go up here. Which of these sentences would be the main idea? Would it be that at some point in your life, you've probably looked up, gazed at the moon, and studied it in wonder? Throughout time, the moon has inspired many people. The next time you gaze upon the moon, maybe you'll be inspired by it too. Okay, one thing I have noticed when I teach this at the beginning of the year, and I'll just have students choose, and then I kind of survey. Most students choose the first sentence as the main idea. And that is incorrect, but there's a reason for that. Most students in 3rd and 4th grade, when they're reading a text and they have to find the main idea usually was in the first sentence. They just kind of opened with it. But you'll see as you're reading in 5th grade text and 6th grade text and 7th grade text that the main idea often is not necessarily the very first sentence. It's usually at the beginning. It's not always at the beginning. Sometimes there's a lot of details that lead up to the main idea. So sometimes it's in reverse. But that's one thing you have to get used to as a 5th grader and going forward through middle school is that the main idea is not always at the beginning like it was in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. Sometimes it's further down the line. And so if I go back and it says, at some point in your life, you've probably looked up, gazed at the moon, and studied it in wonder. Okay, that's just an introduction. But now look here. Throughout time, the moon has inspired many people. Then what happens? After they write this sentence, we have about Beethoven composing a piano piece called Moonlight Sonata. Okay, so he's inspired by the moon. Later, Vincent van Gogh paints The Starry Night. And we know from the minor detail that that has to do with the moon. Then Marilyn Singer wrote a book called A Full Moon is Rising about how people all over the world celebrate the moon. So this sentence here, throughout time, the moon has inspired many people. That's going to be my main idea. So we go down. So what's the main idea? I'm going to put it in my own words. Over time, comma, the moon has inspired many people. Put a period. Let's see if I can bring that down. There we go. All right, so I have my main idea. I have 3 key details. And if you'll notice, as we wrap this little lesson up, if I were to take the main idea and then I were to put those details together and I were to make full sentences for all of those things, so my main idea, the moon has inspired many people over time, period, and then I would have 3 examples to back that up, I would have a nice size little paragraph if I were to write about what I had read. And that's the same way we do when we put our writing together. We have whatever claim we're making, whatever idea we're making, and we have details to back that up. Okay, so that was just an experiment to see if this thing worked, and I think that we're going to be using this going forward. iReady is an invaluable thing for a fifth grader because it really will get you ready for the LEAP test, but also more importantly as a life skill, it will help you understand the text that you're reading. It'll help you know it'll help you learn what to look for, and it'll also help you with your writing. So that's it for today.